Picture yourself crouched inside a shelter built from the bones of a giant mammoth. The wind outside screams across a frozen plain, pushing temperatures far below -40 degrees. The air within the shelter is heavy with smoke from a struggling fire, the only barrier between your group and the endless night of the Ice Age. You have lived on raw meat when hunting was good, and melted snow when water was scarce. You have not washed your body in months, because warmth is life and exposure is death. In this world of brutal cold and constant hunger, your body still follows the same ancient rhythm. Nature calls. There is no toilet, no paper, no drainage, no protection. Only the deadly cold and a biological necessity that could bring lethal consequences if handled without care. In the Ice Age, the most dangerous threat was often invisible. Infection, parasites, water that carried sickness. A single mistake could spread illness through an entire group of 20 or 25 people who depended on one another for every breath of survival. A simple stomach infection was enough to end a life. A contaminated snowmelt could wipe out a whole family. This was not discomfort. This was a matter of life and death, repeated every single day across thousands of years. Yet the incredible truth is that our Paleolithic ancestors did more than survive. They built systems of knowledge, learned from the land, and transformed some of the harshest conditions on Earth into tools for survival. Before science existed, before medicine had a name, they discovered ways to protect their bodies, their water, their shelters, and their communities. Their solutions would one day become the foundations of modern sanitation. To understand why sanitation was a matter of survival, you first have to understand what lived inside the bodies of our ancestors. Long before the first village existed, and long before the first doctor appeared in history, human beings were locked in a constant war against parasites and disease. Evidence from the past tells this story with haunting clarity. In caves, in ancient hearths, and in the frozen soil of prehistoric camps, archaeologists have found coprolites, fossilized remains of human waste. Under the microscope, these small remnants become a window into a dangerous world. Inside them are the unmistakable eggs of hookworms, roundworms, and the whip-shaped parasite Trichuris. These tiny organisms drained strength, caused constant illness, and spread through groups with terrifying speed. For a family of 20 or 25 Ice Age hunters, sharing food, tools, and shelters, one infection was enough to place everyone at risk. A single day of contaminated water could cause deadly dehydration. A few spoonfuls of tainted meltwater could end the life of a child or elder. In this frozen world, disease was not distant. It lived within the group, traveled through their food, and hid within the snow they relied on for water. Because of this invisible threat, the layout of a Paleolithic camp was not random. Survival demanded planning. At sites like Dolni Vestonice, in the region of Central Europe, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of settlements dating to around 26,000 years ago. These sites reveal an astonishing level of organization. Sleeping areas were placed apart from zones used for tool-making. Food preparation occurred in dedicated spaces where bones, stone flakes, and traces of hearths show repeated and deliberate use. Animal remains were discarded at the edges of the settlement rather than near living quarters. This careful spatial separation suggests that our ancestors understood far more about contamination than we once believed. They did not have the language of microbes or the tools of modern science, yet they knew that waste, raw meat, and the materials used to process animals did not belong near their beds or near the places where water and food were stored. This knowledge likely came from generations of observation. If someone fell ill after drinking from a certain spot, that spot was avoided. If too much refuse accumulated near a shelter, sickness followed. These lessons became rules, and these rules shaped the design of every successful winter camp. Their survival was not an accident. It was the result of a system, a mental map of clean zones and danger zones, created long before the first city existed. And in the heart of the Ice Age, that knowledge meant the difference between life and death. As winter tightened its grip on the Ice Age world, temperatures could remain below freezing for months at a time. In this brutal environment, even waste itself behaved differently. What would rot and spread disease in warmer climates became solid and motionless within minutes. This was not just a consequence of the cold, it became a survival tool. When our ancestors stepped outside their shelters to relieve themselves, the waste froze so quickly that many of the dangerous organisms within it fell into a kind of suspended state. Frozen waste did not attract insects, did not release strong odors, and did not immediately contaminate the ground. Groups could gather these frozen deposits and relocate them to the far edges of their settlements with relative ease. In a world where moving even a few steps into the wind risked frostbite, the ability to shape the landscape around them using the power of the cold was an advantage born from observation and necessity. The deep freeze of winter, which threatened every breath they took, also protected them by slowing the spread of disease. Yet even with this advantage, the question remains: how did they clean themselves in a world with no soap, no cloth, and no chance of wasting precious warmth? The answer lies in their resourcefulness. Archaeological sites rarely preserve soft materials, but clues can be found through studies of recent hunter-gatherers and through the logic of the environment itself. Along riverbanks, smooth pebbles shaped by flowing water would have been common. These stones could be rinsed, reused, and even warmed slightly near a fire when conditions allowed. During the warmer months, plants with naturally soft and absorbent leaves, such as lambs, ear, or certain types of mullein, would have been ideal. These plants are known today for their gentle texture and mild antimicrobial properties, making them perfect candidates for personal hygiene long before the concept of microbes existed. But winter demanded different solutions. Clean snow was abundant, naturally sterile when freshly fallen, and surprisingly effective. Arctic survival experts today confirm that fresh snow can serve as a reliable cleaning material in emergencies. For Paleolithic people, snow was not only a source of water but also a natural tool for cleanliness. Its cold shock was harsh, but it posed no danger compared to the illnesses that contaminated surfaces could spread. Some evidence from tool-making sites suggests that wooden implements may have been shaped for hygiene purposes, carved from smooth branches, and occasionally heated near the fire to sanitize them. A person living in the heart of the Ice Age had to use whatever the land provided. Every choice they made carried the weight of survival. These simple materials, gathered from snow, stone, and leaf, were part of a larger system of cleanliness that helped protect their group from the unseen dangers of disease. Water, more than anything else, shaped the health of every Ice Age group. In a frozen world where rivers locked beneath ice and snow covered every surface, finding water was easy, but finding safe water was another challenge entirely. Melted snow might appear clean, but once it touched contaminated ground or old waste left from previous seasons, it could carry sickness through an entire camp. For this reason, the placement of each settlement was a matter of life and death. Archaeologists studying Dolni Vestonice have discovered that these ancient people built their camps slightly above nearby water sources, never directly beside them. This protected their drinking supply from runoff during spring thaws, when waste and animal remains could be carried downhill. Their awareness of contamination was not written in any language, but it was carved into generations of memory. To gather water safely, they relied on the purity of fresh snow and ice taken from untouched surfaces far from living areas. They avoided old snow that had been stepped on by people or animals. They learned to read the land, to understand the difference between safe crystals of untouched ice and the dangerous meltwater that carried invisible threats. Some groups likely filtered water using natural materials like clean sand or layers of moss, a technique observed in many hunter-gatherer societies. When fuel was available, they warmed water over the fire, not always to boiling, but enough to remove the bite of the cold and reduce the risk of illness. They stored water in containers made from animal hide, hollowed wood, or folded bark, and these containers required constant cleaning. Even without scientific knowledge, they understood that stale water was dangerous water. Fire itself became their greatest ally against contamination. The more archaeologists study Ice Age sites, the clearer this becomes. At Dolni Vestonice, traces of multiple hearths show that these ancient families maintained several fires at once, each with a specific purpose. One fire burned hot and steady at the center of the shelter, providing warmth and light. Another fire near the tool-making area produced the intense heat needed to reshape stone and bone. This same heat also sterilized tools by burning away lingering blood or organic residue. Smaller fires positioned around the settlement created controlled smoke that drifted through shelters and helped deter insects. Some plants, when burned, produced aromatic smoke that likely acted as a natural purifier, long before anyone understood why it worked. Through these fires, our ancestors discovered a universal truth. Flame was more than warmth, it was protection. In a world filled with unseen threats, fire became their shield, their purifier, and an essential part of the system that kept sickness from spreading. The struggle against parasites was not limited to waste and water. It was woven into every part of Paleolithic life, including the food they hunted and the plants they gathered. Our ancestors learned through painful experience that certain parts of an animal carried more danger than others. The organs, rich in nutrients and moisture, were also where many parasites lived. To survive, they cooked these organs thoroughly, even when fuel was scarce. Archaeological evidence shows repeated heating patterns on tools used to process meat, which suggests that they treated food with more caution than we often imagine. In addition to heat, they relied on the land itself. Plants such as wild garlic, bitter herbs, and certain tree barks offered chemical defenses that people could not name but instinctively trusted. These plants are known today to contain compounds that weaken or kill parasites. Eating them was not only nourishment, it was a form of natural medicine. Personal hygiene extended beyond the body and into the tools they used. Many Ice Age sites contain small combs and scrapers carved from bone or antler. While some were decorative or used for processing hides, others were likely used to remove lice and other external parasites from hair and clothing. In a world without soap, these simple tools may have prevented countless infections. Their entire approach reveals a pattern. Nothing was isolated. Cooking, gathering plants, grooming, and cleaning tools all formed a system designed to keep sickness from taking root. This system changed dramatically with the seasons. Summer brought mobility. The groups traveled across wide territories, following herds and seeking new resources. Waste could be left far behind, carried away by time and distance. Water sources changed often, reducing long-term contamination. Camps were temporary, sometimes lasting only days. In this season, survival depended on constant awareness. They had to read the land quickly, choose safe water, and avoid hidden dangers. Returning to contaminated areas meant sickness, so successful groups learned to identify and remember the signs of safe ground. Winter, however, demanded a completely different strategy. When the land froze and mobility became dangerous or impossible, camps became long-term homes. Months of confinement inside shelters created a new threat: accumulation. Smoke had to be controlled. Air needed to circulate through carefully placed openings to prevent toxic buildup. Waste had to be isolated and moved away from the entrances. The entire group relied on strict discipline, with every member understanding that a single careless mistake could threaten everyone. Families survived winter not through strength alone, but through cooperation. When sickness broke through these defenses, the consequences were immediate. Some archaeological sites show evidence of temporary structures placed at a distance from main shelters. These separate spaces may have served as early quarantine areas. A sick individual could be moved to a smaller shelter with dedicated tools and their own fire. Caregivers approached with caution, maintaining the practices that kept the rest of the group safe. If sickness continued to spread, the ultimate solution was abandonment. Some Paleolithic camps show abrupt endings, as if the group chose to leave everything behind rather than risk reinfection. It was a costly decision, but it reveals how seriously they took the threat of disease. In their world, survival required more than strength or skill. It required the courage to protect the community, even when the cost was high. What emerges from all of this is a picture far more complex than we once imagined. Our Paleolithic ancestors did not simply react to danger. They built systems. They observed patterns in sickness, in weather, in water, and in the behavior of animals. They connected lessons learned through suffering and turned them into rules that protected their families. These early systems were the seeds of something extraordinary. They were the foundations of public health. At Dolni Vestonice and countless other Ice Age sites, we see the first outlines of principles that today guide hospitals, laboratories, and disaster response teams. The idea of separating clean zones from dirty ones, the belief that water must be protected, the use of heat to purify, and the discipline of isolating the sick all echo through modern life. Even in the most advanced environments on Earth, from military bases in polar regions to research stations in Antarctica, humans still rely on the same principles our ancestors discovered in the cold darkness of the Ice Age. Waste is isolated, water is guarded, tools are sterilized with heat, airflow is controlled. The challenges these groups face may be different, but the logic that protects them is the same. This connection across tens of thousands of years is a reminder that survival has always depended on knowledge, not just strength. And perhaps the most powerful legacy of all is not the practices themselves, but the mindset behind them. These ancient people understood that every action mattered. Cleanliness was not comfort. It was protection. Cooperation was not optional. It was essential. They survived not because the world was gentle, but because they learned how to use its harshness as an advantage. The freezing cold that threatened their lives also helped preserve their health. The fire that warmed their shelters also purified their tools. Every danger became a teacher. So the next time you turn on a faucet, wash your hands, or flush a toilet without a second thought, remember the ingenuity of those who lived before cities, before writing, before science. Their world was colder, harsher, and filled with unseen enemies. Yet through patience, observation, and cooperation, they built systems that kept humanity alive. Their legacy remains in every act of cleanliness, every moment of health, and every breath taken in safety. Their story is not just ancient history, it is the quiet foundation of the modern world.